Welcome to Unveiling Nightmares, where we're crafting nightmares one tale at a time. Today we have a special guest, a real special treat for you. So our special guest today is Ash Ericmore. Hello and welcome to the show.
Hello, thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. It's lovely having you here. So tell me a little bit about yourself, Ash.
I'm a writer from the southeast of England. I write voraciously, release a couple of books a month. I write extreme horror and some lighter horror these days, and I veer a little bit away from splatterpunk, but I do a bit of splatterpunk as well.
Brilliant. So tell me about your books without giving away any spoilers.
Oh, they're all disgusting. I write largely in a fictional town that I created to make my life easier, called Birchingate, and most of what I write is set just there. You can spot the places in between the books, and I have everything from post-apocalyptic shenanigans through to serial killers. My novels tend to go bent more on a sort of 1980s Sean Hudson, Clive Barker rant than anything else. And I've got a lot of novellas which are less plotty and quite often more silly. I do a lot of comedy in my work.
That's good. It's good to get sort of like a variety of things into it, isn't it, really?
Yeah, definitely.
So what inspired you to write in the horror genre?
Oh, I've been into horror my whole life. I'm born and bred on everything from Nightmare on Elm Street through to the current, let's just call them Blumhouse movies. I love horror. I always have. I've got hundreds of films sitting on DVD. I've got everything from Freddy Krueger statues through to horror T-shirts, and I've done a little bit of writing in other genres, and so some of it doesn't suit my style. I've done a little bit of fantasy, which sort of worked. I've done some erotica, which you can see in my extreme horror. But no, it's horror all the way for me. I just couldn't think about writing in anything else.
Yeah. Have you ever done any romance?
No, not romance. I've done straight erotica. Straight. Sorry. I've done some very bent erotica. But no, I've not done normal romance. And to be honest, if you read some of my books, none of my characters have normal relationships, so probably best if I stay away from that.
So can you tell us about the first horror story that you ever wrote?
Oh god, the first one I ever wrote. Oh, you're going back some there. The first horror story I ever wrote would have been about 15 years ago, and it was Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse story, which I had no idea what I was doing, and it was about a young boy who gets picked up to replace one of the Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse, and it was terrible. It was absolute dog poop. I don't know if I can swear on here. So.
No, you're fine. Don't worry.
It was absolute shite. It didn't work at all. It was paced all over the place. The first couple of thousand words read as a children's story, and then I'm effing and blinding all over the place. Absolute shit, absolute rubbish. I learnt my lessons before I started writing properly. When I became Ash. So my first Ash story, Jane Doe, was received really, really well, which is a very post-apocalyptic end of the world scenario. With quite a lot of influences from galactic horror and eldritch stuff in it.
Yeah. So which horror authors or works have influenced you the most?
Oh, well, probably modern. I would have to say Sean Hudson, is a massive influence. I absolutely adore his writing. And Chuck Wendig, who does very dark humour in his writing, and it's really my bag. They're definitely two who influenced me the most at the moment. I mean, through the years, I started reading horror. My parents gave me horror books when I could barely read.
Yeah.
I used to read the Little Vampire books by Angela Sommer Bodenberg, which it's a range of children's books.
Yeah.
And to be honest, I still think fondly of them, and they're plotted well. And yeah, the list goes on. I mean, it's very difficult to say. Lots of people will turn around and go, "Oh, it's Stephen King," and things like that.
Yeah.
I don't really read Stephen King. I'm a very slow reader, so apart from anything else, I can't read books that are too long. Otherwise, it takes me 8 months to read a novel, and I've missed an entire year's worth of books.
Yeah.
I read a little in the indie genre and a little in the traditionally published genres. And to be honest, some of the indie authors I find inspiring in different ways.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's sort of all over the place. I'm very sort of scattershot with where my influences come from and who they are.
Yeah, you're the first person I've spoken to that's mentioned Sean Hudson, which I'm surprised at, to be fair, because his work sort of like venture on the extreme.
Absolutely.
And very silly in some places. So
I absolutely adore him. I absolutely adore him.
Yeah, his work's brilliant.
Yeah. Don't want Edward Lee. I mustn't forget Edward Lee. Sorry.
Yeah.
Everybody says Edward Lee, but I like Edward Lee a lot. I've spoken to the guy. He's lovely. And if I fancy some really, really extreme stuff, it's my Edward Lee I go to. Yeah.
So how do you come up with the dark and eerie settings in your writing?
Oh, well, that I don't know. I mean, most of my stuff is based on what I've got around me locally. And from a place point of view, if you look at what I've got around me, you can find pretty much every place in my stories around me with different names.
Yeah.
The dark and eerie, squicky things in the night come from all sorts of different places. I don't switch off. I've got one of those brains that just keeps churning and churning and churning, and anything can trigger an idea in my head. I walk a lot to try and calm myself. If I don't, I end up sort of manic.
Yeah.
And I'll go out and you go around the park and you'll see a dog doing something, or a kid doing something, or someone falling off a swing, or a bike, or a car accident nearly happening, or just looking a shop window, or watching a film, watching a YouTube video. It can come from anywhere, and it will just spark something in the back of my head, and I'll go, "Oh, I'm going to kill someone like that later."
Oh, that's brilliant. So are there any particular subgenres that you enjoy writing in or find extremely challenging?
I like writing within the horror comedy. Is definitely my comfort zone.
Yeah.
I can ramble away quite happily writing in that area, and there are other parts that are sort of connected into that I can shamble along quite happily. I can write sex scenes, and I don't think twice about it, and before I know it, I've nobbled away 3,000 words, and it's just like, oh, it's time to move on and do something else.
Yeah.
I have a lot of difficulty with believable dialogue, and not rushing through dialogue. It's definitely my stumbling point. I have a tendency of just getting to the crux of everything very quickly, which no one does in real life, and isn't great for a book, because no one ever speaks to each other. They just walk into a room and go, "Oh, I wanted to say this," and then walk out again, which no one does in real life. So consequently, it makes for very difficult for me to write drama or anything in the drama genre, because I just can't get those interpersonal relationships working well. I either end up with a very boring relationship with two people who just mutter at each other about cups of tea all the time because I don't know what to write, or I end up with two people who just say dump their exposition and walk back out, and neither of which work very well.
So how do you decide on the pacing of the scares and the twists in your book?
When I write novellas, I don't worry too much about it because of the length of them. Most of my novella work runs at breakneck speed and doesn't stop. I've got a variety of series of novellas, as well as a lot of standalones, and they tend to run at a breakneck speed from start to end, which I think works fine for horror comedy. It's laugh a minute and then everyone falls down. But yeah, when it comes to novels, pacing is something that I can't do when I pants my work. And I'll pants my novellas. So I don't plot anything. I just sit down and start writing, and I'll write until it's finished. I tried doing that a couple of times with novels, and I tend to get to the halfway mark and then it just stops and I don't know what to do now. And I stare at the wall and go, oh. And I've had a couple of novels where I've just stopped midway, and it's taken me months and months and months to pick them back up and finish them.
Yeah.
And I found that one of the things that I was having a problem with was pacing the novels without plotting them first. So I plot my novels in a spreadsheet now, and I find that if I do that, then I can put in the lulls and peaks in the right places and shuffle them about before I start writing. And it's just a game of throwing it up in the air and making sure that you get your lulls, then your peaks, then your lulls, and such, and just keep on going along that way. I've written a novel that was just peaks all the way through, and it reads very quickly. You can read through the whole novel in a good couple of hours.
Yeah,
but it doesn't make for a fun, engaging novel. You just finish it, and there are novelists and authors out there that write some in the splatterpunk genre who worry less about pacing because of the content of the book.
Yeah,
moving from one grotesque episode to another grotesque episode, so it is full of peaks. And they read through very easily, and they're fun if you want to read it like that. But yeah, for me, I try to put in a good plot base, so I don't want my peaks all the way. You end up reading it through and you miss the plot.
Yeah.
So it's a plot it out very carefully first and try and get in those lulls and slower parts. And for me, multiple characters is the only way that I can do it. Multiple points of view through different characters. The book I'm writing at the moment, you've got your killer and your victims and all of that running about, and I've got my team of detectives who are slowly following about and placing it all into place, and I use those for the lulls, and then go back to the killer for the peak, and then back to them for the lulls. And I find that paces it quite well, and it makes it a more manageable, interesting read for the reader.
Yeah. You were speaking about characters. So what's your approach to character development in horror and extreme horror?
Well, see, characters have got to develop in theory. I use that term loosely. again, I've written a lot of novellas. There's no character development in my novellas. They're almost just one extended scene. Some characters have to develop, and I do attempt to develop my characters and let them grow. I know a lot of people talk about an arc. You've got to have a character arc, and you have to have a beginning and an end for your character, and they have to learn something. For some characters, that's correct, but to a certain extent, not all characters need to do that.
Yeah.
So I have characters in my books that have a character arc, and they'll learn something, and they'll come out the other end a better person. And other characters, it's just something that's going to happen to them, and they're a bystander in their own story, which I know is breaking an absolute rule of writing. Your protagonists, your main characters, have got to have agency, but sometimes in life you don't have agency, and things just happen to you, and you have to sit there, stare at them with your mouth open and point.
Yeah.
I've got characters that do that, and other characters who will turn from the traditional girlie in a pink dress through to Ellen Ripley at the end. If that's a character arc, I don't know. I'm not an expert. But I do try. I do try.
Okay, so with the novellas, do you do like a backstory for the protagonist, and like with plot twists, do you think plot twists are sort of like, how would I say this, something that a novella could have? Or Definitely. Do you think the story's too small for the plot twists and backstory?
No, I plot twist everywhere. I've usually by the midpoint in a book got the end in my head if I haven't already plotted it. So with my novellas, where I'm pantsing my way through, by the time I get to the middle, I know how it's going to end, and I always try and get some sort of plot twist in there, whether that is just as simple as killing the main character, or having the whole story in someone's head, or anything. No, plot twists can be done in most stories, even short stories. You can get a plot twist in a short story, but they have to be carefully thought through. I'm sure that I've got several books with plot twists in that people look at and go, "This is not a plot twist. You just pulled it out your ass."
Yeah,
and you shouldn't pull a plot twist out your ass. But it's to be honest, writing plot twists is like anything else. The more experience you get, the better you become at writing them. There's a lot of people that say you can't write properly until you've written 1 million words. Whether that's true or not, I wouldn't like to say. But you just keep writing. The more you write, the more you learn. Keep writing and reading, and eventually, you can put a plot twist into almost anything. But it just takes experience and learning. As far as backstory goes, no, not really. Not with my novellas. At 20,000 words, you're getting a single storyline, and quite often, if you know anything more than the main character's name for the first half of the book, you're lucky.
Okay, have you ever written something that you thought, like, oh God, I'm going to get away with this, or I've gone too far?
Yeah. I mean, when I wrote Jane Doe, my first story, I thought, no one's going to like this. Amazon might ban it. I promised myself I wouldn't harm children in my extreme horror, and then the first thing I've written, I've just got buckets full of dead kids in the back of a car.
Yeah.
And I just thought, no one's going to read it, no one's going to like it. It's pushing too many boundaries. And it was really, really well received. And I was just like, oh, okay. And then I found myself, because at the time I wrote that, I wasn't on Facebook or Twitter or anything else. I wasn't on any social media. And I didn't know that there was this whole genre that had this massive fan base. I knew people like Edward Lee and Matt Shaw. And I just thought, well, they're rank outsiders and they got lucky. And then I found myself on Facebook and found this whole community of people that were ready to read about eviscerating children.
Yeah.
And I was just like, oh, so I can push this a bit further. And yeah, I mean, I've pushed it, but to be honest, I'm not as extreme as some authors. You look at some of the godless authors, and yeah, they're doing things far worse than I do. We're all killing babies, but some of us are doing it graphically, and some people are just doing it disgustingly. So I don't really worry too much about that anymore. But yeah, it was certainly a concern when I started writing.
Yeah. Have you ever scared yourself with something that you've written?
No, not really. My stuff's too casually humorous to be that scary. Several people have told me that Our Skin of Deadwood, which is certainly one of my more serious and verging away from extreme and just into regular horror, people have said that's scary. But I write things like Seven Smalls, where people strap babies to themselves and then use them as armor in battles. It's very silly stuff that isn't genuinely scary, I don't think. I know everybody finds everything different. I've written about clowns a lot, and people find clowns terrifying. I don't, so I just keep writing about them.
Yeah, my daughter's scared of clowns, so she'd never read anything like that. Don't think she's even watched it.
Oh no! Right, you should just get her in front of the original Tim Curry one. That's terribly silly.
So, how important is the research phase?
Yeah, I sort of what research. I've done a huge amount of research over the last 3 years in the human body. I tend to throw about clinical terms when I'm cutting people up. I'll use the right bone names and get their organs in the right place and their sexual organs in the right place to start with. And so yeah, it takes some research. I've as I said, I've made up my own town that nearly everything is set in. I do write about other places, but there's always somebody who's going to know that place better than me, so I fictionalize it.
Yeah.
And I write a lot about things that I do know about. There's lots of movie references and technology references in my work, and it's because that's what I know about. When I'm writing about something I don't know about, I will research, but I tend to fictionalize. As I say, the amount of times I've had to set something in London just because it's globally recognizable. So I need a big city, so I'll use London.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'll make up a street name with that strip club in that street name. There's none of this. I'm going to use a real location with a real strip club because somebody will have been there, not necessarily to the strip club, but at least walk past the outside of it. Yeah. And they'll look at it and go, this isn't right. So I don't even bother trying to get it right. I'll just fictionalize it and then everybody's happy.
I think that's the best way as well, because if somebody recognises something and they don't like what you've written, they could obviously take it further, couldn't they, as well?
Definitely.
Have you had any memorable reactions from readers that stand out to you?
Well, yes. Yeah. I think I have a reader called Kaz who sent me several videos which are exceedingly funny. And I love her for that. And I've had her with her daughter on her back, dressed in armour, so that they could be in the next Seven Smalls book, which I haven't written yet, but I haven't forgotten about her. Probably the most recent thing that I'll say is there was a backlash on TikTok over one of my books. Somebody read one of my books. I don't know what his name was. I did watch the video, and he was so appalled by one of my books that he felt the need to tell everybody on TikTok that they should take my books and burn them and throw them in the bin. And don't give them to charity shops, throw them away because nobody should be reading this trash.
Yeah.
And I don't worry too much about bad reviews. Nobody wants bad reviews, but that's the whole point of people reading you is some people are not going to like it.
Yeah.
That's probably the most intense reaction I've seen. So yeah, I mean, I see a lot of people. I'm friends with a lot of readers of my work. I know some of them have approached me quietly on Facebook and DM'd me and gone, "Hi, I'm a massive fan. Do you mind if I ask you something?" And I'm like, "Just send me a friend request." So yeah, I see a lot of people. I've got some super fans. I'm going to call them super fans, who I absolutely adore. I'm good friends with them all now. So yeah, anyone wants to be a super fan and come and be my friend, you by all means. And I love it. I love the reactions of the readers and the things that they do to show support. And I love it, and I love all of them.
Yeah, I mean, TikTok is becoming a thing at the moment, isn't it? Where they are basically slagging off extreme horror authors. There was something a couple of weeks ago saying that we should all be institutionalized, if that's correct.
Yeah. I mean, some of us probably should, but no, I've seen things on TikTok's definitely the worst place for it. There was a thing a little while ago against Matt Shaw. And it dragged a load of other authors into it.
Yeah.
And most of these people just, they're not separating the author from the work. And that's something you've got to do. I mean, I would consider myself to be a good, honest, moral man, but I do write about people sticking their fingers inside dead children. But it's all meant in fun.
Yeah, I mean, what we write doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to go out there and do that to a child or to someone. I think, as you say, people need to sort of like separate us from the books and just read the books and not think bad of the author. Yeah. I did message Matt Shaw and invited him for an interview, and he has kindly accepted, but he did explain that he's had some trouble, and which I saw anyway on myself on TikTok. But at the end of the day, he's a horror author and he deserves to be interviewed like anybody else because he's not the person in those books.
No, he's not. So, no, we can get a bad rap. Some of it's good, some of it's bad. And I mean, I've had, well, all publicity is good publicity, as they say.
Yeah. Do you find that, like, if you get a bad reaction on TikTok and it goes, as you say, viral, do you find that helps with sales?
It certainly doesn't hurt. The amount of people that bought the book that this gentleman on TikTok didn't like, I'm not going to complain about. And yeah, they all bought it because it's supposed to be the most disgusting thing ever. It's book tatters. It's not particularly squicky as far as a lot of my books go. So this gentleman who put the initial video up was obviously quite lightly stomached as far as horror goes.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, I got hundreds of people buying the book to find out what the big issue was. Some of them came back and went, "What's this? This is like a children's book." Other people came back and went, "You're right, this is disgusting. We need to burn it." And other people went, "This is great. I'm going to go and read this guy's other work." And I'm just like, well, yeah, you haven't done me any harm by screaming about me on TikTok. So I'm not going to complain.
So how has the horror genre evolved over the years, in your opinion?
Well, it's. I think we as a collective now recognise there's more than one genre in horror. I've been kicking around in the horror genre in between films and such for many decades. And you've always had an underground horror and then a mainstream horror.
Yeah.
But that used to be, I think, really all there was. You had sort of giallo and things like that. But in good old Blighty, we had just sort of everyday horror, and there was that underground horror that no one ever spoke about. But now I think the internet probably has allowed us to be able to just sit there and go, no, we've got all of these different genres in horror, and you can like one without liking another. I know several authors who love giallo horror, and other authors who live and die splatterpunk, and other authors who just other readers who just I want to read clowns, and we've all got genres that we prefer, and I think that's where the landscape has changed now. Everybody's beginning to understand, apart from those people on TikTok, obviously.
Yeah.
That there's different parts to horror, and you can like some without liking others. And it gives us all more freedom to create what we want to create instead of being forced into a niche. What I write now, for extreme horror is quite mainstream. But if this was 15 years ago, 20 years ago, I would be being forced to the underground, because without indie publishing, without Amazon, I wouldn't have an outlet for my work without going to an agent. And most agents aren't going to look at what I write and go, oh, yeah, there's mass appeal for this. So, the landscape has changed greatly, and certainly for the better. And, there's an acceptance now amongst a lot of people that there's a difference between one horror and another. There's a big pie, and we can all have a little slice of it.
So is there any sort of like subgenre of horror that you would just not even entertain and write about?
I don't think so. I can't think of anything I haven't written about. No, not really. I've done everything from killing animals to killing babies to necrophilia. I don't do much alien horror. So I suppose I don't know. I've got no aversion to it. No, there's nothing I would consider outside of my want to write. I'm quite happy to write everything.
So how do your reviewers take to killing the dog?
No one like that. No, no, don't kill animals. Not unless you're ready for that. No, I've killed animals in, I think, 2 books. It's not something I would recommend. Most authors, most of the readers, you're reading extreme horror. It's got nasty things in it that nobody wants to see. But for the most part, you're better off killing children than you are killing animals. Yeah,
I think that's quite a thing throughout, isn't it? Extreme horror. You can do whatever you want to a person. You just don't kill the dog.
Yeah, absolutely.
So have you got any upcoming projects that you're excited about?
Yes. I as I said earlier, I write a lot. So I have a novelette come out with Godless every month, and at the moment I've got a novel coming out every month as well. I've got several things in the pipeline. I'm just finishing up a book now that I started writing probably about this time last year, and I had a lot of trouble with it. So I got about halfway through, and I couldn't work out where to take the book. So I put it out to my subscribers, and I sent them the first half of the book and asked them to help me with the rest of the plot of the book, because I'd started writing it without finishing the plotting, and I got halfway through and I couldn't work out what to do with it.
Yes.
And they've come through, and I've got a near complete plot now, and I'm really excited to get it out. I can't tell you what it's called yet because I still haven't got a title, but that'll be out probably sometime early next year. And yeah, I'm really it's the most exciting thing that I will have finished recently. I've just finished writing a book called Burdens that I really enjoyed writing, which is about the movie industry. And yeah, I kind of like writing the novels. I do enjoy writing them. So I hate editing, but I love writing. So yeah, most of my projects are exciting for me. I love them.
So you said you have a couple coming out each month. How do you find the time?
I'm a full-time writer and graphic designer. So I write every morning. I start work at 7 o'clock every day. I work from home. I write 4,000 words before I do anything else. Then after that, I've usually got book covers to do for other people, book covers to do for myself, editing. I've got to do my Pilates. And so, yeah, I mean, it's a full-time job. I work 7 days a week, and Monday to Friday I'll work 10 to 12 hour days. But it's that's what it takes to do all of this and try and maintain some sort of quality to it, because I do attempt to make everything as good as it can possibly be. So it's not a case of just write it and put it out. It's write it, edit it, out to beaters, back from beaters, edit it again. And so, yeah, it's a work. It's a job. It's a job to put out a novel and a novelette every month. But I'll manage.
Yeah. Now you mentioned you do book covers. So you obviously do your own book covers, yeah?
I do my own, and I do others as well. I do independent work for other authors. I do work for D&T Publishing in the US. I've done work for other publishing houses as well. So yeah, I do all sorts of covers for all sorts of people in cross genre. I've done everything from cowboys in front of ranches with their shirt open, through to naked women on the bed, through to spaceships in the sky.
That's lovely. So how do you come up with like your horror ones?
For my own ones, it's I do them to market. So it's about a feeling or an idea that the book gives you, rather than setting a scene inside the book. The first thing most authors are, they'll go, oh, well, there's a scene in the book that's like this, and that's what I want on the cover, which is absolutely fine as long as it's something that represents the genre, because that's what the readers are looking for. They want representation of the genre by the cover. So for my own, it's a piece of cake. I just go, this is the sort of book that should have this cover on it, and I'll put that sort of cover on it. For my independents, they'll generally give me an idea of what they want on the cover, and I'll fiddle it around and send them a mock and go, this is what I think you should have on the cover. And it's usually somewhere between the two, somewhere what they want on the cover, but manipulated to be genre.
Yeah.
And that's how you get a to market cover. I was at a convention. I was at WorldCon 4 years ago, I think, 4 years ago. And one of the panelists said, anyone with a camera can put a book cover up. And I couldn't more strongly disagree. Taking a photograph and then putting it on a book cover is a terrible, terrible, tragic mistake. It takes, to be able to do that, you've got to be A, a professional photographer, B, a professional cover designer. And that's not who they were talking to. They were talking to people that couldn't afford cover designers. So yeah, it's a skill, but it's about getting it to market and covering the bases on other things that people don't think about. You need to be able to read the cover when it's a thumbnail. It needs to look good when it's on someone's phone, not just on my 22-inch monitor.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a whole skill in itself. I've been a designer for years in various industries. So
what do you think of the AI? Like
no,
writing and book covers.
no AI. I think that AI is here to stay. It's not something that we're going to get rid of. I think that the behaviour of the people that have used the scraping software to steal people's artwork and people's writing in order to feed this machine the knowledge it needs to be able to think for itself. And it isn't thinking for itself. It's just regurgitating what it's been fed. I think it's absolutely disgusting. And I am exceedingly happy that American High Court has said that you can't copyright AI written material and that you can't copyright an AI created image, because that fundamentally means your books and book covers that are AI created are all worthless. And now, 2 or 3 weeks ago, Amazon have put on their submissions page for indie publishing, you've got to put a declaration to say whether there's any AI generated material on your cover or in your book. And they're Amazon. They're not going to tell you why they've said that, but there's going to be a reason. So I'm glad that I don't have any AI in any of my stuff. Because I'm afraid that at some point they're going to turn around and go, no AI, and that'll be that. All of your books will get scrubbed.
Yeah, it's true. I think I did see the Amazon, it's like multiple choice, isn't it, on Amazon? There's a couple of things that you can choose.
Yep.
So, yeah. Okay, so what advice would you give to aspiring horror writers?
Read and read wide, but make sure that you write at the same time. The big piece of advice that anyone will give you is to read, but you need to write, and you need to learn to write, and you need to, if you want to do it for a living, you need to be able to write on demand, which is a different skill than just writing as an artist. I'm lucky that I love my job, but I'm under no illusions that my writing is a job. So I have to get up and I have to write thousands of words. And you can only do that by writing. You don't get up on day one and go, well, I'm going to write 4,000 words today, and sit down and write 4,000 words. To be able to create 4,000 words that make sense takes lots and lots and lots of writing. So read as widely as you can in genre and write every day, and as much as you can.
Yeah, that's brilliant advice. If you were to give a recommendation for one of your books, which would it be?
Probably Seven Smalls if you like comedy, and Outskin of Deadwood if you like horror. That's my guess.
Brilliant. Well, it was lovely having you here today, Ash.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much for accepting my invite to come on the show.
It's been lovely being here.
Thank you. Is there anything else you want to add?
No, I don't think so. I just want to thank everybody that's come to hear me, and thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. Stay tuned, dear listeners, for more spine-tingling tales and dark discussions in a world of extreme horror. Until next time, remember the nightmares are real, and here on Unveiling Nightmares, we're crafting nightmares one tale at a time.